I would say the first 5 years of my life were spent in Bartica. So that's where I knew, I mean, and Bartica was my whole life. It was everything to me. The layout, the clock. I mean, even now, sometimes I go to Bartica, I just look for the clock, but somebody knocked it down years ago. The Stelling, modern hotel, all those were just imprinted on my memory. Growing up there, I think the greatest influence, the greatest memory I have is of that lake. You know, you were able to wake up in the morning and look out at this huge expanse of water. And it was very tranquil, and I think it had an effect on me, you know, that environment, because it was so cool and it seemed so natural, so beautiful. So I've always, whenever I'm stressed out, I always think of Bartica and that lake. In fact, some of the residents of Bartica describe the confluence of the three rivers as a lake. That was my greatest recollection. The second recollection, of course, is the people. And in a way, the people are quite the opposite to the environment, because the people were the entire diversity of Guyanese communities. They were Africans, Amerindians, Chinese, Portuguese, East Indians, and a lot of people were mixed, even in those days. So it was a multi-ethnic community, and there was a high degree of tolerance. There was a high degree of tolerance. It was a well laid out community. Bartica started as an Anglican settlement. So the church was a significant element in society. I am an Anglican, and it was an Anglican church, St. John the Baptist Church. And I always remember that you could look out of a church and see the school, and you could look out of the school and see the church. So church and school went together for me. It's a very pleasant place. And it always surprised me later on that it was never a town. Even now, Bartica is still what is called a neighborhood. And that's why I've committed myself, not out of nostalgia, but I've committed myself to making Bartica a town, because I do believe it deserves to be a town. So all in all, the physical environment, being close to the rivers, the three rivers, the demographic mix, seeing people of all ethnic groups from childhood, and the pleasant atmosphere. It was non-conflictual. There was hardly any traffic. The biggest event was the arrival of the ferry from Parika. And all in all, I would say it was a very pleasant, perhaps the most pleasant time of my life, growing up in Bartica. Well, Wim was quite different. I don't think it was a shock, but it was certainly a different community, because Wim is largely, almost exclusively East Indian. And the first thing that took me by surprise was, of course, moving from an Anglican school, St. John the Baptist School, to the Alkaline Church of Scotland School. And at that age, I couldn't imagine there was a difference between God. There's one God. And I kept asking, well, why do I have to come to a Church of Scotland school? Why not an Anglican school? Things got worse when my father started to take me to the Anglican church at Port Morant, St. Joseph Anglican Church. It was just very confusing. So growing up, you know, I couldn't understand the difference, but it wasn't a shock. Because I had grown up in Bartica, I was accustomed to mixing with people of other ethnic groups. But my family was there with me, and I felt very comfortable. I made new friends, and I learned of a new and very important part of the country. I have a recollection of, I can't remember when it was Mahatma Gandhi was killed. I think it was 1948. I just remember seeing this huge procession of Indians all dressed in white, of Hindus, I think, all dressed in white. And just, you know, it just made me conscious of being, you know, part of that they were always different people, you know, that we weren't just the same. I never expected everybody to be like me.
David family came into Queenstown in the early 60s, if I remember correctly. He lived in Ornock Street. I lived in Anaira Street. And we had a group that we call ourselves the Magnificent Seven. And there was a shop at the corner of 3rd and Ornock. It was Can Shop. And next to that, the Grangers lived. The Grangers' house seemed to be a focal point for us meeting. I mean, there were times when we would go to parties as a group, and 2 o'clock in the morning, we would come and sit down on the Granger's gate, and his parents, well, his father, who was a police officer, we all go home, and the boy said, man, go and sleep, and then next thing is a basin of water on us, and those type of things, you know. The thing is that you have friends and you have friends. Some people you will do anything for because of the way how we came up. And I think when we go back to the Queenstown group, we were like so close as young men. We did a lot together. We can look back, we could smile, etc. Most, if not all of us, have done well in life. We've had families and they've gone on, etc. And David was one of us. Sandra Granger, Sandra Chana Sue, lived approximately 1 block from me, and that would have been about 2.75 blocks from David. And the boys and girls in the area, we all went to parties together, etc. I can't recall David Granger having any other girlfriend than his wife. I think that David was the type of man that when he becomes committed to something, he sticks on. And I don't recall him being a knockaround. I mean, I can't say the same for myself. And in fact, we were discussing the same matter, one or the other Queenstownites, and they mentioned that Sandra was David's only girlfriend. So, you know, he's that serious. What I do know now that Sandra is very supportive in the work that David does now. A lot of his writings, etc., that she is very instrumental in helping to put things together. I've heard him talk about her spending time editing, etc. So obviously that he saw some quality in her that to make a bond for life. And from what I'm seeing now, it was a correct decision and a fruitful one, that she's very supportive in everything that he's doing now.
I promised my husband many moons ago, against the blandishments of our children, nieces, nephews, and others who want to know all the details of our meeting and courtship, and I promised I wouldn't discuss it with them. I would hardly discuss it with you at this time.
Well, this time this thing rearrange. David and Moses changing the game. Color we live as one, end corruption, crime, and let me get rid of shame. I am a guy needs pride in my vein. Put up your palm and your key and say, hey, hey.